everybody for joining us to talk about Griffin's new book, Listen, a Poetic Creature. Um, this is such a fun book. At Interstellar Flight Press, we really love doing experimental poetry, and anything that is sort of like referential. So we have another book by Andrea Blythe that is a found poetry book from like a Stephen King book. And we have, like we really like doing that kind of thing. And so Griffin, I had really liked your other two books, and I remember I reviewed them in my like yearly roundup, and I was really glad that you reached out to me about this book, because it's just exactly the kind of thing that I love, and I really love references in poetry. Like, like people will ask me about my own poems and they'll be like, where does this thing come from? And I'm like, yeah, that's like a direct reference to this other thing, and so like the nice thing about your book being this book length cento is that people can find out at the back of the book. You have this nice listing of like where everything came from, and it's super impressive, and I can't wait to hear you talk about it, because the effort that must have taken is super impressive to me. And yeah, and like I appreciate how you approach gender and the body and this idea of monstrosity, and otherness, being othered, through like kind of the lens of this creature, that you're kind of creating in the book, and that really appealed to me also, as someone who kind of thinks, outside of gender or lives. I feel like, yeah, I have a lot of feelings about gender and its gray spaces, and that was a huge appeal to me about your book. um and you've done so much already. Like, I was super impressed that you told me that you're in an MFA, because I was like, you've already done so many books, like amazing. That's really cool. I am really glad for you. And yeah, and so thank you for letting us publish this book, and for being here and reading from it and everything.
Yeah, thank you. I was so excited when you picked this up because I think I remember uh, Interstellar Flight was closed for submissions, and I actually emailed you to say, "Hey, when are you going to open again? Because I have this thing I'd love to send you." And so I was so grateful that you decided to read it and that you ended up picking it up because I couldn't think of a more better home for it.
Yeah, we
So
that
I
that
was really excited.
that sometimes happens. Like, I'll meet someone, or like someone I know, loosely through other stuff, will have something. And so like I always say, if you see me at an event, you have a book that you think might appeal to me, or me, you can always pitch me something. Like we have a
Yeah,
huge group of volunteers at Interstellar Flight Press, probably like 60 people at some point in our Discord, and everyone is always welcome to like pitch me, because it's especially with poetry, it's a small group of us
it
writing
is.
writing speculative poetry. So I always say
Yeah,
that, but yeah,
yeah.
I'm super excited to hear you talk about the book and read from it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Thank you. I guess I should just maybe just start with reading it and then we can dive into questions. I will read from my copy here. I'm going to read, I haven't decided how much I'm going to read. I will read some, but not all. But it probably won't take super long to read it because it's very spaced out. So I will read for a little bit and then I will be happy to talk about kind of the process of creating this book and what I did with it and why I did it that way. So this is Listen, a Poetic Creature. Hear my tale. It is long and strange. I warn you that what you're starting to read is full of loose ends and unanswered questions. It will not be neatly tied up at the end, everything resolved and satisfactorily explained. All this will be absolutely incredible to you. To me, the one incredible thing is that I am here. I've tried to close my eyes to it, but I'm not going to anymore. What I ask of you is reasonable and moderate. You must not breathe a word of this to anyone. I must say what I must say. It is already decided. I must be bold now. All this happened, more or less. Now, listen to me. I have, doubtless, excited your curiosity. Shall I make my report? Let's fucking get it over with already. I'll make my report as if I told a story. I'm going to write a poem, I think, but it may be a novel. I have a lot to say. I entreat you to hear me. A quotation had started the train of thought. It is good to have an end to journey towards, but it is the journey that matters in the end. I allowed myself to be governed by the impulses of the moment, scattered like the debris of some nameless meteor. Mind apparently was dwelling on strange things, the thing that was to bring so much struggle and calamity. Such a small thing, yet it contained a mystery, a blank and intricate absence in all its immense potential, tabula rasa, blank slate. It was a vast thing, beyond knowing, a sea of information coded in spiral and pheromone, infinite intricacy that only the body, in its strong, blind way, could ever read. That glimpse, like all dread glimpses of truth, flashed out from an accidental piecing together of separated things. Two seemingly unconnected strands, now twisted together, made the world unfamiliar overnight. A process cannot be understood by stopping it. Understanding must move with the flow of the process, must join it and flow with it. I was thinking now, and in the faint starlight, I carefully picked out the broken fragments one by one. I had an intuition. It's all about putting together many apparently unconnected things. When you piece them together the right way, you get the truth. So I must break through all reticences at last, even about that ultimate nameless thing. There will be difficulties, discrepancies, but I must at least supply the basic structure. I feel sick at the thought of how much has to be done, how much time it's all going to take, the hundreds and hundreds of interconnections. I am about to proceed on a long and difficult voyage, but deep down inside me, I needed it. I couldn't help but act on it, to see the thing more clearly. Everything began spinning away into blackness. I saw around me nothing but a dense and frightful darkness. Darkness fell in from every side, a sphere of singing black pressure on the extended crystal nerves. I stared out at the darkness, fighting to calm myself. In the dark, something fell. I leaned against the window and tried not to look outside into the blackness. Lost, so small amid that dark, I listened, straining in the darkness for some reply, a shout, a sigh. I heard nothing. Lost in darkness eternal, I was, at least for the moment, nowhere at all. Compressed at the heart of all that dark, there came a point where the dark could be no more, and something tore. The darkness seemed to grow luminous. Starlight displaced just enough of the night to charge each shadow with menace. All I could think of to do was wait until dark. And it was suddenly dark again, the ordinary night sky standing overhead as if nothing had happened, a black and comfortless sky. The blackness is emptiness, vast emptiness stretching out infinitely. But it's only in the utter black that you can feel the true scale, the volume and weight of that gaping unknowable. It's inky nothingness, lost in darkness and distance, solemn with the sudden realization. I located the unorganized body, and I realize this is the end of something. Maybe not limbo so much as the falling space. Every experience before this night had become sand curling in an hourglass. Before, dark and opaque bodies had surrounded me, impervious to my touch and sight, glittering with thousands of watching eyes. I knew my silence disquieted them. I told as much of the truth as I could. The mouth is left empty, a lost referent. You're not bored by my talking all this time? Ah, good. Well, to make sense of what happened later, I have to tell you all this. The world was to me a secret which I desired to discover. To ask questions I had to struggle to understand. It was a queer, neck-ruffling thing, a faintest suggestion. I could feel it in my fingertips, an actual physical sensation, a compelling urgency to do something. And I sat there, my fists clenching and unclenching. I fought nicely against it as long as I could. The cracks grew fast. My thoughts were far away. Why are you unhappy? I'm not unhappy. And I think I'll stop there, um, at least for now. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much for reading it. I always
Yeah, thank you.
I love hearing our authors read their poetry particularly because I feel like when I hear someone read poetry, it teaches me something about how I'm supposed to be reading the book, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and just the way that you read it, I was like, oh yeah, like there's with the places where you pause and the plus signs for and, which
Hmm.
if y'all read the book, you'll see that that has a purpose behind it. So it's just yeah, it's a lot of fun to hear you read it. Can you talk about like how you came to write this book?
Yeah, so I talk about this in the author's note too, but essentially this was a dissertation for my master's program. I did a master's in science fiction studies, a master's of literature program in science fiction, which is great because now I can say I'm a master of science fiction, and that's always kind of a fun thing to say. Um, but I had the chance to do a creative dissertation, and so that's what I did for this. I kind of knew from the start that that was I wanted to write a poem for it. But I gave myself kind of a couple challenges when I actually kind of sat down to start doing it, which was that I was going to write a singular poem as opposed to a collection, which I had never done before. It was going to be a long poem because the dissertation had to be a certain length. So a single poem, a long poem, both of which I had never really done before. I wanted to make it a cento or cento, however you want to call it. I wanted to do that, and then I wanted to use prose, the prose fragments from science fiction novels to create it, which meant that I then had to turn those prose fragments into poetry. So I kind of gave myself a lot of challenges in this, and it was really fun to do. It was also a lot of work. As you can see from the bibliography, there's like a ton of text in this novel. So I read a lot, and I had a lot to do when I started trying to sift through those texts and compile quotes, and then compile the quotes into something broader. That was a lot of work,
Mhm.
but so worth it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It's a lot of fun. I feel like it gives people ideas because like I'll tell people about it and they're like, oh yeah, like it would be fun to do something, similar to that. And it is on this like gray area of like like you're working with someone else's words. And so in a way you're sort of like having to like honor that other person, but
Hmm.
because the the way it's formatted, and we purposely don't include any footnotes in it.
Yeah,
And I think that works really well because it takes away that like aspect of like constantly looking like, well, what is that quote from? What's that?
yeah.
Um, yeah. And so like, how did you pick like the individual phrases? Were they just ones that stood out to you and then you kind of arranged them, or was there like any sort of linear process?
Yeah, so how do I answer this? I didn't go in with an agenda, really. I knew myself well enough to know that there were things that I liked writing about and there were things that I was interested in. So I went looking for quotes kind of with the understanding that that would be true. And then as I read each book, I just typed up the quotes that resonated with me and seemed interesting to me. And then at the end of it, I had like a 40-page document that was just full of prose
Oh
quotes
no.
that I then had to like kind of start sorting and arranging and figuring out like what went together and in what order, and highlighting quotes I had already used so I didn't reuse them, all this good stuff. So I just yeah, it was a lot of kind of trying to find things. And yeah, I initially initially had to like line up all the quotes, and then about midway through the project, I initially had quotes around them, so that I could tell where things started and ended.
Yeah.
But I did eventually choose to remove them and, like you said, not use footnotes because I felt that was distracting. I felt it was showing the seams a little bit was a little too distracting. So, yeah, I don't know if that kind of answers the question, but it's
Yeah.
kind of a
And
lot of what I was thinking about.
in terms of like, it's funny because in terms of like copyright, we get this question a lot. Because people are like,
Hmm.
how do you do this? These are like copyrighted works. And I'm like, they
Yeah.
are, but you're creating an entirely new
Hmm.
thing. And I think the removal of those aspects where the seams, as you call them, which is a really beautiful
Yeah.
way of describing it, um, is part of that, of this, like we're creating a entirely new
Hmm.
art piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. I thought about that. I was like, "Oh, some of these works are copyrighted," and I was like, "No, I think this is so transformative. Like, you can, if you know the work, you can recognize it. Like, I think I read there was a line about like lost in darkness and distance, which is the end of Frankenstein.
right.
So if you know Frankenstein, you're going to know that.
Yeah.
But it's so transformative and pulled out of context, while still kind of holding true to its original meaning for the most part. I think that
Yeah.
it is it's a fully transformative work. So
Yeah. I like to mention
yeah,
that because there's always one or two people who don't really quite know that, like,
yeah,
and I'm like,
yeah,
you can do cool things like this
yeah.
with poetry. Like this is the thing
Yeah.
poetry can do. The other aspect that I'm interested in, and everyone who's listening, feel free to put any like questions that you have in the chat section, and I will bring them up. But yeah, the other thing I wanted to ask you about was this idea of the monster and this
Mhm.
creature. And to me, I think that particularly queer people and people on the spectrum and people who have been othered and are marginalized often tend to end up really relating more to the monster character in horror.
Yeah.
And I really see that in your work, and I was wondering what you thought about that and just kind of like your thoughts about the other and the monster.
Yeah. So I have a lot of thoughts about that. Like, a big obsession of mine is Godzilla. And I
Yes.
love Godzilla so much.
Tell me more.
And it's, oh, I have so much to say. Any conversation where I can work in Godzilla is a good
Yeah.
conversation. So I find Godzilla really compelling. I find Godzilla really compelling as a monster movie, as a kind of horror movie that's commenting a lot on, geopolitics and what the actions of America, right? And also it's a very human drama. The original Godzilla film it's also a human drama. Um, but I find the monster figure of Godzilla really compelling because partially because of um, how it evolves how it's evolved over the last 70 years and how some aspects stay core to it and some kind of change with the time. But I do think a lot about kind of monstrosity and otherness. I think, yeah, it's really easy for people who are marginalized to identify with the monster because it is a kind of othered figure. Um, there's a really great, oh gosh, and I'm going to forget who it is. Give me one second just so I don't misquote this person. Jeffrey Jerome Cohen, and the Seven Theses of Monster Theory. Um,
Yeah, I've read that.
yeah, I think it's a really wonderful resource. And I think, like, I read that and I was like, oh yeah, this encapsulates a lot of why I think monsters are really interesting and important and doing a lot of cool things, and a lot of times why, people who are marginalized kind of attach with monsters, like they're at the gates of difference, or they represent a desirable other. It's also kind of like a strange other. So I think like those seven theses are really, I like definitely would look into that because they're really cool, and I think it says better than I could. Some of the reasons like monsters are really compelling, especially for people who are often marginalized and like seen as other. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I can't
Yeah.
remember what I was doing that I was pulling from that or something. I
Yeah.
was writing some article or something, and I was, yeah, you know what I think it was? I think I was teaching a workshop that was genre related, and
Yeah.
I don't like book or whatever kept coming up because it's so great.
Yeah.
Kelly says the aspects of SF science fiction were clear from the reading, but I was also struck by the sense of mystery that emerged. Are there aspects of mystery or other detective genre traits that were important to creating this narrative? And if I can sneak in another question, how does that mystery relate to the way the poem thinks about gender and bodies in the speculative space? Great question.
Ooh, great question. Um, yeah, I suppose I hadn't necessarily thought explicitly about mystery and detective genre traits. Though I think certainly a big aspect of this book was discovery, um, particularly self-discovery. And so I think in that sense, I guess in some ways the narrator of the poem is performing a lot of detective work and uh, taking on some of those aspects of investigator. Um, there's definitely a dialogue in this book between kind of there's a right side italicized voice that shows up. There's this kind of self dialogue that's happening. Almost in some ways, in some places, it is almost kind of an interrogation. So I think that is, yeah, I guess I hadn't explicitly thought of that. But I think, yeah, that definitely does show up. If I'm remembering right, some of the actual right hand italicized quotes that form that dialogue were taken from an interrogation scene in one of the original novels. So actually, I think that's really great. As two detectives are trying to interview someone and get a sense of the story. I think it's from the Three Body Problem, if I remember right. It's from Three Body, where they're trying to solve a mystery. So I think yeah, maybe it's inevitable that those kind of things came out in the book. In terms of how mystery thinks about and investigates gender and bodies in a speculative space, I think um, this book, I think something that was important for me in kind of putting this together is that I think the thesis is on the first couple pages, which is that not everything is going to be satisfactorily explained. Like it's an attempt to solve a mystery, which I think is for me is kind of like something that I think about with in regards to gender a lot. Um, Sometimes it's this attempt to discover or define or understand and kind of puzzle out what feels like a mystery sometimes, and that in a lot of ways is trying to do those things to solve the mystery and to by defining and investigating. When I think that a lot of times, particularly in the speculative, like gender and the body, like it's not always super possible, I suppose. Um, or at least it's kind of an ongoing mystery. And so I think that was something that I was definitely trying to pull out in the poem in terms of like there's this attempt to define and understand that sometimes succeeds and sometimes falls short. Yeah. Does that kind of answer the question, Kelly? Yeah.
Very cool to work in the self-discovery and as interrogation and the impossibility or ongoing mystery of gender. As you were talking, I was thinking about your book reminds me of this book called The Patchwork Girl by Shelley Jackson, which I don't
Hmm.
know if you've ever heard of it, but it's like a
Mm-mm.
90s hypertext poetry book.
Great.
It's so
Sounds
cool.
great.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's got yeah, this main character is like kind of a Frankenstein type female character. And I think that was part of what drew me to the book too, is like this
Hmm.
connection to these other sort of like works that are in that conversation of like the body being broken
Hmm.
or like pieced together in some
Yeah.
way. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of that in gender. So
Yeah. I think there's a line in the cento about like I'm a constructed self. Um, I can't remember exactly what page that shows up on, but I think there's, I've become a constructed self. I think that is really pertinent to that question too.
Mhm.
Thinking about patchwork. I mean, cento literally means patchwork. So that's really fun. I'm gonna have to check that novel
Yeah,
out.
you should. I don't.
Yeah,
I think I learned that book originally like in college, and it was like on
that's great.
CD. So I don't know
I
how
love
it's available
that.
now. Like I'm assuming you can download it somewhere. But anyway,
Yes, I
um,
will go looking. That
yeah.
sounds great.
I wanted to also ask you about just like the formatting. I don't know if this will show,
Yeah.
but like you have this like one page that's like, what was that?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
I love that page, and I love like
Yeah.
the other formatting and the white space. So like, how do you approach that? What is your theory or feelings about white space on the page?
Yeah, I think a lot about kind of form. Just in general. Like one of my other chapbooks is just it's a collection. It's 26 abecedarian, so an ABC poem where each line corresponds to the a letter of the alphabet.
Yeah,
It's
so hard to
26
write.
abecedarian poems. Yeah, the X's really got to me after a while. Um, when are you doing 26 of them? It's just like how many X words can I find? But it's 26 of them. They're all abecedarians and they're all self-portraits of science fiction movies. So like that's even just the concept is like so locked into that form of like definition.
Yeah,
Um, that I think a lot about just like form in general and how is space operating on a page. And I think for this one, it was particularly important to think about space and shape on the page because otherwise, like to me, so something I've been saying to my students a lot, I'm teaching creative writing right now, and something I've been saying is like I feel like the unit of meaning in poetry is the line, whereas in prose the unit of meaning is often the sentence or the paragraph. And so to me, I was like, well, line is how you create meaning in poetry. And if I'm taking prose fragments, which really are just sentences, how do I kind of make them poetic? And a lot of that was through space and shape on the page. And so I was thinking a lot about kind of how I was using that space on the page and whether I was using it effectively um, as I was kind of going through and writing this because I was like, how I don't know how else to turn into poetry. And I think also I'm interested in thinking about how this is a patchwork poem, right? This is a collecting and a piecing together of seemingly unconnected things. So maybe it's not just like a straight kind of left aligned thing. Maybe it's just kind of patchworked across the page, and all these pieces are kind of pulling together slowly. Um, like I think the darkness section I read is kind of this tight block. It's one of the few spaces of tight block you get in the poem. And so like I kind of wanted that section to be visually distinct. Like you go from something that looks like this to the darkness section, which is just kind of a block before it kind of opens up again. So it just, yeah, like that was something that was an intentional visual choice because I wanted it to be to feel condensed and to feel oppressive the way the darkness does in that moment. So I think, yeah, I was thinking a lot about how can I use space to convey meaning in
yeah.
this text. Yeah.
And that section, the page, I'm looking at the print because I
Yeah.
got the print one. But
Yes.
um,
USPS.
I've had it
It
for
will get to
weeks.
me eventually.
Um,
Yes.
this is my privilege. But yeah, like as the publisher. But yeah, the other page, the next page that's opposite of it also has like this like thick chunk block.
Hmm.
So it's funny that those two pieces like fell apart from each other, like right,
Hmm.
on a spread.
Yeah.
Um, the last kind of question I have is about the people that you chose to like sort of borrow from. Um,
Yeah.
and you have a lot of sci-fi standards, like I mean
Yeah.
obviously Frankenstein, Asimov,
Hmm.
Campbell, Samuel Delaney, and like some of them are what I would consider to be on the sort of like feminist side of the spectrum, right? So like
Hmm.
Joanna Russ and like Ursula K. Le Guin, but some are very much like on the sort of like old guard side
Yes.
of science fiction. And I
Yes.
wondered whether you felt like you were subverting in any way some of the works and maybe which ones. And yeah, what do you think about all that?
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I definitely had so many opinions about these books when I was reading them. Um, so I think, yeah, it was important to me to kind of have a range of sources. Like I wanted something that was kind of going from like the proto science fiction, like the in debated but often considered first science fiction novel Frankenstein to things that were being published in the last, I suppose the last, oh no, Three Body Problem came out in 2015, so 2008 originally published, like 2000, 2008, 2000, so I guess that's, I don't know, coming up on 20 years ago. But I wanted it,
We're getting old
that's,
here as we
oh,
speak.
I don't know. But I wanted it to be kind of recent. So I wanted like an interesting spread of like voices in this. So I was thinking about that. So I think that's why some of the like, you have some more contemporary, like more feminist, but you also have like, you know, less feminist voices. A really great example in here is that I have some stuff by H.P. Lovecraft, famously problematic weird fiction author. Um, but like Jules Verne is in here, H.G. Wells is in here. So I think I wanted a spread that just kind of hit a lot of like voices in science fiction and voices that are well known, and maybe less well known depending on who you're reading. Yeah, so I think part of it was that I do think um, I wanted to dialogue with some of these voices and like some like I took particular pleasure, for example, in like H.P. Lovecraft's work and like using that and just being like, I'm going to take you out of context and just make your words mine. Like I took a particular enjoyment out of that. As I did with some of the works that I enjoyed less, or I had strong opinions about how the novel was treating their characters, or who the speaker was, and how sympathetic I found them. Um, but I think even in the works that I like found it, like I used the Left Hand of Dark, like Wynn's Left Hand of Darkness, um, pretty intentionally. Um, which is definitely a book about gender, right? So but even that, I found myself like I had to kind of divorce the words in some ways from their original context in order to use them. Um, so I think I was thinking about them once I kind of took the fragment out, it kind of was floating in a little space, I think. So it was interesting to feel the connection, see the connection, and the language really like the sometimes the language of the source would just overpower. But sometimes it was really amazing to see like if some of the Verne lines like you take them out of context and they don't sound as old as they are. You know, for example, um, like I think there's one of the lines in here is like you need to learn to face the abyss, which is from Verne, but it doesn't sound like it. So it was really interesting to me to see like what could happen with the language if you just looked at it kind of without context and as language. So I think it was interesting, and I was definitely thoughtful about like who I was pulling from and why. And some of it was I want to subvert this, and some of it was I want to honor this, and some of it was just I think this is a great line. Um, so some of it was that too. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
think there's a surprising like I think actually one of the reasons that we love science fiction and fantasy is that they do usually surprisingly hold up to the test of time. Like
Hmm.
a lot of the older works are so much more readable than other works of that time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I say lovingly, but like, like,
Yes.
yeah, like Frankenstein, like that, you can just drop right back into that and read
Hmm.
it today and it still feels like really relevant. And
Yeah.
so I love when poets are, expressing that. Like there's these works that hold up in science fiction, I feel like is one that really can last beyond its time period. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think so too. Which is part of what makes it really lovely as a genre to
that's
work
why
with.
we love it. That's
Yeah.
why it's the best.
Yes.
Well, speculative
Yep.
things. Yeah.
Speculative. Speculative
Yes.
in any way. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but those are all of my questions. Do you have anything else to say, Griffin?
Yeah. If other people have questions, I'm happy to talk more
Yeah, feel
about
free.
this text for sure. Um, I think yeah, I'm always just so curious to see how people are going to take this text because it is just such a kind of wild project. Like even when I was thinking about it, I was like, this is really fun. This is kind of crazy. Would anyone be interested in seeing like a version of it where some of the quotation marks are in, where you can kind of see some of the scenes?
I would.
Out of curiosity. Yeah.
I want to see behind the scenes.
Yes. Let me give a behind the scenes glimpse here. Um, make sure I select the right window here. Um, so yeah, so like this is an example of kind of near the start of it.
Yeah.
Um, so you can just kind of see there's 8 quotes on this in this just this little section. Um, I have the citation somewhere. Um, I don't know if I have them in this version, but it's just interesting to me to see like some of
Oh,
the things
for
that I've done
sure.
with it. Like I really enjoyed that line, but like that I am here. I've tried line break to close my eyes to it, but I'm not going to anymore. Um, I enjoyed that like that juxtaposition. I enjoyed that pairing.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's really fun. Yeah.
Super
Yeah.
fun.
Hey, Griffin.
Hi, Lauren.
Hey, Warren. Warren, thank you so much for being here and thank you for blurbing my book.
No, for sure. Yeah, and it's great to be able to look behind the scenes. Um,
Yeah.
One thing that struck me in going through Listen is just the immersion of the narrative and the story that came through. And because it had so many different pieces, it felt both universal but also just like very natural. Was there anything in building it that surprised you in where the story of creature of
Oh
Listen?
yeah. Yeah, let me stop sharing this. Anything that surprised me. Yeah, like so much actually. Like it was really interesting. Once I started, it felt like a snowballing kind of process. Like once I started trying to put these pieces together, it just like kind of snowballed into something that felt very cohesive. And that's not to say like it went through at least 5 drafts. So it's not to say like it all happened like right away, but um it really surprised me like what I could put in conversation with what. Um like it just really kind of startled me to see what spoke together. Um, like that section that I just showed you is like Wells, Asimov, Shelley, Verne, Michael Moorcock, Frank Herbert, Kurt Vonnegut, and Jack Finney. So it's just like this really wide selection. And so it kind of surprised, what really surprised me, I think I'd say, is like the fact that I was able to create a cohesive voice because I really wasn't sure I was going to be able to do that. I wasn't sure it was going to be a cohesive narrative, and I actually didn't expect the I to come out and to cohere as much as it did. And I do feel like there was an I speaker voice that really just kind of crystallized as I was putting things together. Um, I think that was the biggest surprise to me is that I really wasn't expecting that. I was hoping for it, and I was thinking it might happen. But I thought it would actually be a much less I-driven narrative than it was. So thank you.
Good question.
Yeah.
Waiting to see if there's any other questions, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I love the book, obviously. And I appreciate, getting to publish it. I think I hope it's going to be like a contender for some of the poetry awards, like I could see
Yeah.
it, as a Bram Stoker book, as a
Mm.
um, SFPA book, and it will now qualify potentially for other awards. I have to think about what other
Yeah.
awards it might qualify for. But yeah, it's such,
Yeah.
I think it's definitely different than anything else that's being put out in speculative poetry right now. So
Yeah.
um yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Yes.
hope everyone picks it up if you haven't checked it out yet. And we have a bunch of other cool poetry books that we've done.
Yes.
If you also hate Lovecraft, we have a uh,
As you probably should.
as you should. We have a book called Can You Sign My Tentacle that is
Mhm.
a kind of makes fun of Lovecraft. It's like hip hop meets Lovecraft. We have Necessary Poisons by Andrea Blythe. That's that Stephen King book that I was talking about. And we have another kind of experimental book that is a field guide. It's called Field Guide to Invasive Species in Minnesota.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that one is like, it looks like a real field guide. Like when you open it up, it's illustrated. And so yeah, we have a ton of books that are kind of in the same like sort of vibe. If people are interested in looking at those.
Yeah.
And then yeah, and thanks everyone for coming and hanging out with us
Yeah.
on a Monday night. I know there's a lot usually happening on Monday, but we appreciate
Yeah.
it.
So much. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. It's really wonderful to see everybody, and thank you for celebrating this book. It's been it's been a lot of work in the making, so it's really wonderful to see that. So thank you for being here.